Welcome back to this series, the Pressure Free Living interview series for April. And I'm here with a new friend, but I have to say a very dear friend from the moment we met, Coach Jim Johnson. Jim lives up in Rochester, New York, place I drive through a lot. And we actually have mutual friends, a cousin of mine. So
Mhm.
it's just been a delight to meet you, Jim. And I really wanted to have you on this series because I think your story, number one, is so inspirational. And then how you've evolved it into the speaking that you do today. So, welcome, Jim, for joining us here. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself and just dive right in.
Well, thanks, Elle. Yeah, so I'll take you back very quickly. My childhood, I was the oldest of six children. My mom and dad were both teachers. My dad was actually my high school basketball coach, and I really wanted to follow in his footsteps. So that kind of took me in that direction. I really got into basketball in high school, playing for him for 3 years. Got very much humbled, like I guess a lot of young kids. I thought I could play in the NBA and didn't make my college team. So that I played 1 year of college, transferred, and got cut. So that was a pretty humbling experience. Uh,
Yeah.
and I actually kind of got off on a wrong path. I ended up partying quite a bit for like a year and a half. Fortunately, I met a lady my junior year that helped straighten me out a little bit. And we've been married now for 42 years. And
Oh, that's so good.
I convinced her to come back to, she was from Monticello, New York. So I convinced her to come back to Rochester and we started. She was actually in recreation, but got into teaching a little bit later. And we both ended up being phys ed teachers and she coached some. And I coached basketball was my number one love, although I coached multiple sports. I was a head coach in basketball for 30 years at four different high schools. The last two high schools was my hometown called Greece, which is the largest suburb of Rochester. And I didn't start very well. So after having a couple years as a JV coach, where I did have some success from win-loss standpoint, I became a head coach at 25 years old and took over a program that was about 20 minutes from my hometown. And they hadn't been very good, but of course, in my mind, I thought I was going to lead them from the outhouse to the penthouse. And of course,
Right?
that was until I led that team to 17 consecutive losses. And I
Wow.
was in an interim position, and they decided not to rehire me, and which I guess, in other words, they fired me. So
Right.
it was a pretty humbling experience. Actually, I got a break though. I ended up getting hired as an assistant coach for a junior college. And for some of the listeners, if you follow basketball, the interesting thing is this guy's name was Bill Van Gundy. And little did I know at that time that both his sons would end up being head coaches in the NBA. So
Wow.
Coach
Wow.
Van Gundy kind of took me under his wing and helped me. But I really, after that year in college, although I did one more year a little bit, a couple years later, high school was what I really loved. And I became a head coach at a smaller school, did much better than my first stint. And then I ended up taking over a program that was in pretty bad shape in my hometown. It was called Greece Olympia. They had only had one winning season in the past 10 years. And I was there for 7 years, and fortunately, we got things going pretty well. The last 3 years was three of the best years the school had ever had. And then
I gotta pause you for a second
sure,
because when you've said a couple of times it was a humbling experience.
yeah,
And every single game, someone's going to lose.
yeah,
And and also sometimes, you could be even a fantastic coach and still get fired or
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
let go.
yeah,
However you wish to put it, right?
right,
Moving on.
yeah, yeah,
And so I think it's really interesting that despite how many times you said that you kept going as a coach, like you didn't give up staying the path to keep coaching, which some people would have stopped at that point. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, definitely. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so I really had a passion and I wanted to be successful, and I ended up, having a lot of work on myself and started to study leadership extensively. And, that reflected as I became a better leader. We had better teams. And after my 7 years at Greece Olympia, one of the other sister schools that I always thought was the best position. I mean, there's got a lot of reasons, so I'm not going to really delve into that. But I ended up applying for that position and I got it. And then the interesting thing is, I was kind of known for the last part of my career at Greece Olympia and then at Greece Athena for my first 8 years, is the guy that we won a lot of games in the regular season, but we couldn't win the big one. We kept losing
Ah.
our sectional tournament. In fact, we lost 6 different times in the semifinals. I was never even able to take a team to the finals.
And when
And
you say sectional, that's like division in some other states, right?
yeah, so our New York State is a pretty big state. We have 11 sections.
Got
So
it.
winning a sectional is not easy to do. In fact, I've had, colleagues that have coached their whole career have never won a sectional title. So they're not easy. And but so what that all changed for me is had a young man come into our program about my 7th year. His name was Jason McElwain. The world knows him as J Mac. And Jason is on the autism spectrum. And he tried out for the JV team. I was the varsity coach. And a couple days into tryouts, I didn't know Jason at the time. And my JV coach came in and said, "We have this young man. He's very small in stature. He's like 5'6", 90 pounds. And he's not very talented coach, and he's on the autism spectrum. He has learning disabilities, but man, this kid loves basketball and he wants to be part of our program. I'm going to let him be our team manager and practice with the team." And so that's what he did. And I started to get to know Jason because in our high school, and I think a lot of high schools, the JV and the varsity play back to back. So
Hmm.
Jason would sit on the bench. I say that lightly because he would get a little emotional during the JV games because that's the players he is around most of the time. But then he wanted to sit on the bench for the varsity game. And it would always warm my heart because after the JV game, Jason would be pretty disheveled. He always wore a white shirt and black tie, but his shirt would be hanging out after the game. And one of my varsity players would always go over and straighten his tie out and get him ready. And he was much calmer his sophomore year for the varsity games. But I just started falling in love with the kid because he was so passionate about basketball, like I was. And what was very unique about him, besides his challenges, was the fact that after the season, he started attending all our off-season program, and he was so into it, and he really wanted to make the team as a junior on the varsity. And when he came out his junior year, I brought him in and I said, "Jason, unfortunately, you're not quite good enough to make the team." I mean, our program has been pretty strong,
Hmm.
but he I offered him the team manager's job for the varsity, and he embraced that. In fact, kind of a funny little story. The first team meeting we had with Jason as our team manager, I walk in the room and he immediately raises his hand. I said, "Yeah, J-Mac." He says, "Coach, we know you've never won the sectional championship." And I said, "Well, Jason, thanks for the reminder." And but he says this year is going to be different because we're adopted this mantra called "Stay Focused." We're to help you win your first Section 5 championship. Well, we had another good season. We got to the sectional semifinal now for the 6th time in my career, and we lose at the buzzer to our crosstown rival. And we are devastated. I'm like, I don't know. In fact, I lost it that night at home. It's the first time my wife had seen me. I was saying, I don't know if I can ever get this done. And she reminded me because at that point I had gotten clarity about my personal mission statement, and which was to be an outstanding role model that makes a positive difference in the world by helping others make their dreams come true. And she said, "You know what? You don't have to win a sectional championship. You just got to work with these young people and help them be the best they can be." And so she kind of straightened me out, and I came back from my senior year or Jason's senior year, and again he came to all the off-season workouts. So, and he got a little bit better, but he was still very small in stature. He was like 5'9", 110 pounds his senior year. So when I told him that he wasn't going to make the team, but I wanted to give him a gift. And the gift was for his loyalty, as I was going to give him a uniform for our final home game, the senior night where we honor our seniors. And it was pretty interesting because I wrote a book about it called "A Coach in a Miracle," because the season
It's
The
right
first,
here.
yep, there it is, was a disaster because we had a lot of internal strife and the team was divided. But fortunately, with a lot of work and a lot of soul searching by me and our staff, we finally got the team back united in the second half of the season. We got some momentum going into senior night. We had won 8 of our last 9 games. And senior night was on February 15th. And I gave him his first uniform. It was number 52. It was way too big, but he didn't care. In fact, there was a rumor going around school that he slept in it for 2 straight nights. He was pretty fired up. Uh, but senior night, it was really cool to see him embrace his parents before the game in uniform instead of his white shirt and black tie. That really was very touching to me. And so during the game, my thoughts were I wanted to get him in with enough time so he could score a basket. I thought if he could score a basket, that's a memory he'll cherish for the rest of his life. So after 3 quarters of the game, I got everybody in but Jason. So I decided with just over 4 minutes to go, the timer's right. I pointed to him. He nearly ran right on the court. He was so fired up. And then the first time we have the ball when he's on the court, well, I got to tell you this because this was pretty touching. Was when he walked on the court for the first time, our student body, we had a good following that year. They called themselves the Six Men. But what Jason and I didn't know is one of our parents had made all these pictures of Jason's face and put them on paint sticks like placards and gave them to the students and said, if Jason comes in the game, show these. Well, when they did, I got so overwhelmed with emotion because I had no idea they were doing this. I sat down and tears started to flow down my face. I was profoundly touched. But Jason's now in his first varsity basketball game. The first time he touches the ball, he's got a 3-pointer from the corner. And I remember looking up as he shot, and the whole crowd stood up in anticipation. And Elle, it misses by like 6 feet. It's not even close. And I kid people that I know you're not supposed to pray in the public schools, but I was praying, dear God, please help him get one basket. So the next possession, he actually has a much shorter shot from about 10 feet. And this time it hit the backboard, hit the rim, fell off. But then crowd groans. And I'm like, all right, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. Then the third possession, he has another 3-pointer from the right wing. This time he lets it go. Magic. It goes in. The place just explodes. And I'm thinking, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has Jason scored, he's got a 3-pointer. It can't get better than this, right? Well, the crazy sidelight, and I'm going to fast forward and I'll come back and finish the game, is that Jason's idol was the late Kobe Bryant. In fact, Jason used to sign his name, Jason J. Mac Kobe McElwain. I kid you not. That's how he used to sign his name. So he loved Kobe Bryant. Well, 6 months after that game, Jason's at the ESPY Awards in California for the greatest sports moment of the year. And there's 4 finalists for that award. And one of the other finalists is his idol, Kobe Bryant. Kobe had scored 81 points that year for the Lakers. So he meets his idol and he beats him out for the ESPY. So how did he do that? Well, he didn't just make 1 and 3. The next possession, he came down and made another 3. Then he made a basket where his foot was on the line, and then he missed a couple and he made a couple. And the two things I'll never forget, with a minute to go, I'm sitting on the bench. I'm tears still flowing down my face. I cannot believe what I'm witnessing. And I get a tap on my shoulder and I'm shocked. I look behind me and it's Jason's mother, and she's bawling her eyes out and she whispers in my ear, Coach, this is the best gift you could ever give my son. Of course, what would you have done? I cried harder.
Right.
Then the game ends. In fact, if there's ever a movie about it, they'll make it a drama. But the funny part is Spencer Porter, our opponent, scores with about 10 seconds to go. And I want to give kudos to their coach and their players. They were really good sports that night. But our player takes the ball out of bounds, and instead of throwing it to our point guard, is he throws it right to J-Mac. So J-Mac's dribbling down, and I kind of look up at the clock and I see it's ticking down 7, 6. I'm thinking they're just going to let him go in and make a short shot, a layup. Oh no, he pulls up like 2 feet from the arc. I'm thinking, Jason, don't shoot from there. You're going to ruin this moment. He launches this rainbow, swish. I look over, our entire student body, all the people in the stands run on the floor like the movie Rudy. And Then our players put him up on his shoulders, up on their shoulders. He's got the game ball over his head. He's like this. And at that point, I had no idea how many points he had. And our public address announcer comes on and says, the leading scorer for Greece Athena tonight, J-Mac with 20 points, including 6 3-pointers. And it was just crazy. And the two things I'll share for now, we could delve into other things, but as a coach, you're always sharing about the we over me, the essence of teamwork. And what was so cool is the 4 kids that were on the floor with Jason. I never asked them to pass Jason the ball, but out of their own hearts, they passed the ball to him every possession. In fact, I still kid Jason because I still see him all the time. Hey, Jason, I'm still looking for your first assist. You didn't pass the ball once. But it was truly amazing. And then the last thing, just to close the story, I mentioned that as a coach, I had never won the Section 5 championship. Jason's now got to go back and be our team manager. And at this point, after a couple days, it becomes a global story. I mean, the phones are ringing off the hook. It's just crazy. And of course, we were trying to prepare for this tournament. And because Jason had not played in 6 regular season games, he could not play in the sectional. So he went back as a manager, but he embraced that. And we actually, our areas now, I wouldn't consider a basketball hotbed, but, we like sports like most every place in the country. But we play our championship game at our arena downtown. It seats about 10,000. And normally for our championship games, we have different classes. So it goes through the whole day. We were the second last game. When we walked in the arena that night, I was expecting 3 or 4,000. It was sold out. There was 10,000 people there.
Oh my goodness
And
gracious.
then we start the first championship game I've ever coached. We're down 14-3 after 4 minutes. I'm like, oh boy, that pregame speech didn't work. But the kids were so resilient and they stayed strong. And with J Mac encouraged them, we actually rallied, and our guy made a basket with about 10 seconds to go, and we ended up winning by 3 points and won our first sectional championship. So it was just a roller coaster of a year, but certainly Jason's game was the most memorable of my whole career. I coached over 600 varsity basketball games, and that one will certainly always be my favorite. So,
Wow, just amazing. And again, like a lot of hardship. I've read this
yeah,
book, by the way. This book
yeah,
is I love the way you've woven leadership into
yeah,
this book because of the hardship you went through
right,
and what that story is. And there's so many elements to that story. There's race, there's people not understanding each other. It's really, really cool.
yeah,
And so I highly recommend the book to as a good read for first, the story is remarkable. It's
mm,
incredible. And I just saw a little clip past my feed about a boy with autism who they just a soccer team just brought him in to their soccer field in England, just gave him a
wow,
whole night. It was just so cool. And they let him score
yeah,
a penalty
yeah,
kill, a penalty
right,
shot.
yeah,
Like I'm. You started that. You started this opportunity for people to understand
yeah,
that we can include people. And
right,
yes, you talked to the other coach and you made sure it was all okay with your association, like all the things you needed to do, right?
right,
I mean, it wasn't just putting them in, like you had to
right,
go through a lot of hoops.
yeah,
And
absolutely,
yeah, I just think it's incredible. And now so much has happened because of that, because of your story and how viral it went.
yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
So,
Um,
so
wow,
thanks.
Jim. And so you've been a coach for so long, and now you speak on leadership, you speak on dreams,
Yeah.
making dreams come true. And
Mhm.
I would love for you to share, what are a couple tips or things that you can share?
Yeah, so I'll share one thing and I'll talk a little bit about my speaking. So the ironic thing is I coached for 10 more years after that. And we actually, Jason volunteered as a volunteer assistant my last 9 years. We actually won 5 more Section 5 championships. So he was really my good luck. In fact, I kid people for a small fee, I'll run him out to you because he was certainly my good luck charm because we had a really good run. And I, so, but I had done some speaking in the basketball world, but I was also at that point in my life really big into personal growth. So I was listening to a lot of the Zig Ziglars and Jim Rohns and Tony Robbins and all of the greats. And I also followed a lot of great basketball coaches because I was a basketball coach. So, but this little do I know, people start reaching out and they want me to share the story. And, I never been that kind of speaker. So I kind of, the first few, I was trying to figure things out. And then after doing a few, I was uh, driving home one day and I got this epiphany. I said, you know what? Almost everybody has a big dream, but I'd say majority of people don't think their dream can come true. And if I can share, Jason, what he did, if I can help inspire people and what I do is I'll give them some tangible keys and then the inspiration of the story because I can't guarantee that everybody's good, their big dreams are going to come true. But the one thing I really have learned from Jason is I know you can do more than you think you can. And when you embrace that mindset, I think that so, I really started with one thing. I did a speech called Dreams Really Do Come True. And I've traveled, a lot of the country doing that. But it was part-time. I was on the side.
Hmm.
And so I decided to retire from teaching and coaching in 2016. And that was a hard decision because, it's funny, I'll say a little side, like I often see, coaches that leave and say, I'm going to spend more time with my family, which is actually a euphemism for the fact that their team's not going to be very good. So, you know, and that was not the case with, in fact, my assistant that took over. I've been out of it 9 years. Has made the finals 6 times.
Wow.
So, so I didn't leave the program bare.
No, you did not. No.
It was good. Yeah. So that part was hard, but I just felt I could make a bigger impact. And so when I did retire and started speaking, I met a lady through the National Speakers Association. We've been working over a decade together. And we started talking about some ways that I could weave because I love leadership and I love, team culture and all the things we were trying to build where I was a head coach. And so that's what I started to do more of. Although lately it seems like people are looking for inspiration again, because I've been doing some of my dream speech and some of my speeches recently. But I do a leadership, I do a team culture, and I do some other things. I do a breakout session on leadership and goal setting and that
Mhm.
kind of thing. So but by doing the leadership and culture, I've started to do more businesses where I've spoke a lot in the education sector because that's where I'm from, and
Mhm.
I'm speaking at a couple of big conferences coming up, one in Kansas and one in Michigan. But my next event is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's to a business. I'm going to speak on team culture. But people love the story, and I love sharing it. I mean, it touched my heart deeply, and so I have some principles of leadership that I share that we could talk a little bit about. I have a few, principles, a couple of them overlap between, some of the concepts I share with people about helping them make their dreams come true. So I don't know which angle you want to take, but
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
let's do one of the overlaps. I'd like
Yeah.
to hear that.
So
Yeah.
a couple of them, one that's a real overlap is that I think in discovering and creating your own dream coming true, and also to be a good leader is I think you have to have clarity about mission. And so I really encourage people to discover their personal mission and write it down. I mentioned my mission because it really changed my life dramatically. And one of the books that helped me immensely when I started to become an avid reader was Dr. Covey's book, The Seven Habits. In fact, I got an opportunity. Unfortunately, it was a year after Dr. Covey passed. I got a chance to speak at their global leadership conference, and
Oh,
that was
nice.
a great experience
Nice.
for me.
One of
Um,
my mentors actually helped him write his book.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, but one of the things he talked about in the book, and I really was not that familiar with it, is really understanding what your personal mission. And so I started to spend a lot of time. And that's one of the things I try to teach people, whether it's dreams or, being a more effective leader, something. And I talk about, how to build a team, leadership and the culture. But also, one of the things that I admired, in fact, I'll tell you a story about JMac that's is pretty cool, is that uh, I talk about in dreams and how to be a team player. And that's what Jason, he was the essence of that. Because what was so cool is that after that season, when he scored all his points, we got interviewed a lot, from media all over the country. And it's funny because they would often ask him a question. Well, Jason, what was the best thing about your senior season? And of course, they were expecting him to talk about his game. And he'd throw him a curveball because he always said, "Oh, winning the Section 5 championship, that was by far the best thing that happened." And it kind of would knock him for a loop. But that's how much he believed that winning that sectional championship, that it was like such a happy thing. But I kind of share in one of my keynotes that it really helped me from a perspective because we won our first Section 5 championship. But I tell the story that after we won that, because we were getting so much media attention, we had a ton of media at that game. And normally, we usually just have a local, but we had reporters from all over the country there because of the story. And I'll never forget because early in the press conference, somebody asked me, Coach, what was the best? Or no, this is how they worded it. They said, Coach, you just won your first sectional championship. How does this compare to the JMAC game? And I thought, for a moment, I said, you know what? I'm really proud of my team and excited that we won the sectionals, but nothing has ever touched my heart and soul like the JMAC game. And what I really try to teach people, the best way to make your dreams come true is to help others make their dreams come true. So that was a
So
great
good.
lesson for me and something I really try to share with people.
Oh, it's really beautiful. We have time for one more nugget. So if you have one
Okay.
more thing you'd like to share.
Well, you know what? The one thing I've been sharing because I really try to push leaders because in my leadership keynote early, I'll always ask, is trust important in building a great team? And I've spoke all over the country, and it's been pretty much 100% hands go up. But then I kind of throw them a curveball and I shock a little bit with my next statement when I said, "Well, do you have an intentional trust plan?" And then what I do is I talk to them. We had three keys because, when we took over these programs, I started to figure out how important it was to build trust. And so we had a 3 point that, I taught my staff, and then we really worked with our players. And our 3 points in building trust is one, we had to align our words and actions, be consistent. Like if we had practice at 6 o'clock in the morning, if I'm the coach, I've got to be there before 6 o'clock in the morning, because I'm aligning my words and actions. And I think that was something we really tried to teach our players. Number two is we really wanted to base our program on telling each other the truth. Now, I tell leaders that I think that's both an art and science because there are times that I knew I could call a player out in front of the whole team and it would be impactful because I knew because building relationships, I knew that player could handle. There were other times I knew players that couldn't handle it, so it was a one-on-one behind closed doors. We were talking about telling each other the truth. And then the
Mhm.
third one was, you know, every program I took over, they had been bad. So I was kind of the turnaround guy, and
Okay.
in doing that, one of the things I really learned from the Ken Blanchard book, The 1 Minute Manager, is catching people doing the right thing and then praising them and recognizing them with specific praise. In fact, I always give leaders an example. Instead of saying, nice job, Johnny, or nice job, Susie, I gave them the basketball illustration. Hey, Johnny, that was a great job how you dove on the floor for that loose ball. That's what championship players do on championship teams. So they have real clarity because what gets recognized usually gets repeated. So
Yeah. Okay. I don't remember if it was a conversation with you or a conversation with one of my mastermind people, but we were talking about this very last thing and planting planting the seed for a team member to see that someone's done something right. So not just the leader doing it, but
yes,
within the ranks,
right.
can be super, super powerful too. And if that
Yeah.
that culture develops, that's kind of a cool thing too. Or
Yeah.
that, you
You're
said to somebody, you said to one of the teammates, "Oh, I really loved it when so and so did this." And then that gets back to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's something, like one of my other keys we talk about is servant leadership. And I think the best servant leaders are people that develop other leaders. And
Yeah.
that's what I think we did really well the second half of my career is we were a player-led team. And when your players are accountable for each other and praise each other, you got something special. So
Very nice.
yeah.
Very nice. Well, Jim, thank you so much for this. How can people get in touch with you?
So my website is coachjimjohnson.com. On that, we have a free newsletter. I do a free weekly blog, and I also have a podcast called the Limitless Leadership Lounge, where we help young and emerging leaders. It's kind of my gift back because, as I mentioned, my first job didn't go very well. So,
Right.
and I thought I knew everything at 25. So, one of the things I'd like to do is give back to young people and help them become better leaders, and not only themselves, but how to influence others in a positive way. So coachjimjohnson.com is best way. And I certainly feel free to, my email is coachjimjohnson@gmail.com. So if people want to reach out to me personally, I respond to all emails, or my manager will. And if I can help you in some way, we'd love to do that. So
Oh, beautiful. Speaking of championships, I wore my Broncos Western Michigan shirt tonight because that was a seed planted in 2007, by the way, by my mentor that we could have a national championship D1 team. They had a D1 team, and it finally happened 18 years later.
yeah,
So sometimes it takes a while.
it
You've
does
got to
take a
bring
while.
coaches in, you've got to change a program around, like the whole thing. But my son and I went. It was an amazing night. I'm also celebrating this week my 15 years in business, so 15 years of pressure free. So we had a little celebration here with one of my sons, and so it takes work.
Yeah.
And when you put the work in and you build the kind of team, and I'm just going to go back to that intentional trust plan, align words and actions, tell each other the truth, and catch people doing the right thing. That's a beautiful little trifecta right there. So, Jim, thank you so much. We're going to close out of the Facebook room now and close the recording and then open it up for the people that are here. So let me find this here. Okay. And